In the vast and brutal tapestry of the Second World War, few days stand out with such monumental significance as June 6, 1944. This date, forever etched in history as D-Day, marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's oppressive grip over Europe. It was the day the Allied forces launched Operation Overlord, the largest seaborne invasion ever attempted. The goal was audacious and incredibly risky: to land hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the fortified beaches of Normandy, in northern France. This was more than just a battle. It was a colossal gamble designed to open a crucial second front against Adolf Hitler's armies, forcing them to fight on two sides and ultimately accelerating their defeat. The success of this operation was absolutely vital for the future of freedom in the world. The planning for D-Day was an immense undertaking, a masterpiece of strategy, deception and logistics that had been in development for years. The Allied powers, a grand coalition of nations including the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and many others, knew that a direct assault on Fortress Europe was necessary to liberate the continent. They chose the beaches of Normandy as the invasion point. This choice was a strategic masterstroke, as the Germans had expected the invasion to come at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. This element of surprise was crucial, achieved through an elaborate deception campaign that misled the German High Command about the true location and timing of the landings, giving the Allies a fighting chance. On the eve of the invasion, an incredible sense of anticipation and tension filled the air across southern England. Over 156,000 soldiers from the Allied nations were preparing to cross the treacherous English Channel. These young men, from different countries and backgrounds, were united by a common purpose: to liberate a continent from tyranny. They were supported by a staggering armada of nearly 7,000 naval vessels, from mighty warships to humble landing craft, and an air force of over 11,000 aircraft. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, made the difficult decision to launch the invasion despite uncertain weather, famously telling his troops, "The eyes of the world are upon you." The invasion began not on the beaches, but in the dark pre-dawn hours of June 6th. Thousands of paratroopers and glider-borne infantry from the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, along with the British 6th Airborne Division, were dropped behind enemy lines. Their mission was perilous and vital: to secure key bridges, road junctions, and coastal gun batteries to disrupt German communications and reinforcements. These brave soldiers faced disorientation, heavy enemy fire, and the chaos of landing far from their intended drop zones. Their actions in the darkness were the first critical steps in ensuring the seaborne forces who would follow at dawn had a chance to establish a foothold on the hostile shores of France. As the sun began to rise over the French coast, the main event of D-Day commenced. The Allied invasion force targeted a 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coastline, which had been divided into 5 distinct sectors, or beaches. The Americans were assigned to 2 beaches on the western flank, codenamed Utah and Omaha. The British were tasked with landing on 2 central beaches, Gold and Sword, while the Canadians were given the responsibility for the beach situated between them, codenamed Juno. Each beach presented its own unique set of obstacles, from the terrain to the strength of the German fortifications. The success of the entire operation depended on the ability of the soldiers to get ashore, overcome the defenses, and link up the 5 beachheads into one solid front. The experience of the soldiers varied dramatically from one beach to another. At Utah Beach, the landings went relatively smoothly, thanks in large part to the effective pre-dawn bombing and the crucial efforts of the airborne troops who had secured the causeways leading inland. The American forces there suffered comparatively light casualties and were able to push off the beach quickly, achieving their initial objectives ahead of schedule. This early success was a vital part of the overall plan, providing a secure anchor for the western end of the Allied line, and demonstrating that, under the right conditions, the formidable Atlantic Wall could indeed be breached by a determined fighting force. However, the story at Omaha Beach was terrifyingly different. Here, the Allied soldiers faced the very worst of the German defenses. The pre-invasion naval and aerial bombardment had been largely ineffective, leaving the formidable German bunkers, machine gun nests, and artillery positions virtually untouched. The American troops of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions were met with a storm of withering fire the moment their landing craft ramps dropped. They were pinned down on the exposed shoreline, struggling against a rising tide, deadly obstacles and a determined enemy. For several hours, the situation at Omaha was perilous, and the success of the landing hung precariously in the balance. In the British and Canadian sectors, the fighting was also intense, but the forces there made steady progress. On Gold, Sword, and Juno beaches, specialized armored vehicles known as Hobart's Funnies played a crucial role. These included tanks modified to clear minefields, bridge ditches, and destroy concrete fortifications, providing essential support to the infantry. Despite facing stiff resistance and suffering significant casualties, particularly the Canadians at Juno Beach, the soldiers fought their way inland with incredible determination. By the end of the day, they had secured their beachheads and begun the arduous task of pushing deeper into Normandy, creating the foundation for the liberation of France. The challenges faced by the Allied soldiers on D-Day were almost beyond imagination. Simply reaching the shore was a life-threatening ordeal. Many men were burdened with heavy equipment, weighing them down as they waded through the choppy, cold waters of the English Channel. The German defenses were ingeniously designed to inflict maximum casualties, with underwater obstacles like steel hedgehogs and mined wooden stakes tearing holes in the landing craft. Once on the beach, the soldiers had to cross wide-open stretches of sand, completely exposed to the relentless fire from machine guns, mortars, and artillery pieces that were expertly positioned in concrete bunkers built into the cliffs and dunes above. The bravery displayed by individual soldiers and small units was the deciding factor in overcoming these terrifying obstacles, especially on Omaha Beach. With senior officers often among the first to be killed or wounded, it fell to junior officers and non-commissioned officers to rally the terrified and disorganized men. They led by example, charging forward through the hail of bullets, destroying enemy machine gun nests with grenades and rifles, and slowly, painstakingly, creating small breakthroughs in the German lines. This was a day of small-scale heroism writ large, where the courage of ordinary men, faced with extraordinary circumstances, turned the tide of a battle that could have easily been lost. The logistical challenge of supplying the invasion force was just as daunting as the combat itself. Once the beaches were secured, they had to be transformed into massive, functioning ports capable of receiving a constant flow of men, vehicles, ammunition, food, and medical supplies. To solve this problem, the Allies had engineered one of the marvels of the war: two enormous artificial harbors, known as Mulberry Harbors. These prefabricated concrete structures were towed across the channel and assembled off the coast of Normandy. They allowed the Allies to unload thousands of tons of supplies each day, sustaining the advance and ensuring that the troops on the front lines had what they needed to continue the fight. The human cost of D-Day was immense. By the end of that single day, the Allies had suffered more than 10,000 casualties, with over 4,400 confirmed dead. The beaches were littered with the wreckage of war and the bodies of the fallen. Each casualty represented a personal story of sacrifice, a family left to grieve back home. The German defenders also suffered heavy losses, though exact figures are harder to determine. The sheer scale of the bloodshed was a grim reminder of the price of liberating Europe. It was a price paid in full by a generation of young men who fought and died on those sandy shores for a cause greater than themselves. The success of the D-Day landings marked a decisive turning point in the Second World War. By establishing a strong foothold in Normandy, the Allies had finally opened the long-awaited Western Front. This forced Hitler to divert a huge number of troops, tanks, and resources from the Eastern Front, where they had been locked in a brutal struggle with the Soviet Union. Now, Germany was caught in a giant pincer movement, squeezed between the advancing Soviets in the east and the growing Allied armies in the west. The strategic advantage had shifted irrevocably in favor of the Allies, and from this point forward, the defeat of Nazi Germany was no longer a matter of if, but when. The Battle of Normandy that followed the landings was a brutal and costly campaign. For nearly 3 months, Allied and German forces were locked in savage fighting in the dense hedgerows, fields, and towns of the French countryside. The Germans fought with skill and ferocity, but they could not match the overwhelming superiority in air power and the endless stream of supplies and reinforcements that the Allies poured into the beachhead. The eventual breakout from Normandy, in late August 2024, led to the liberation of Paris, and the rapid advance of Allied forces across France and Belgium, pushing the German army back towards its own borders and sealing its fate. Today, D-Day is remembered as a powerful symbol of international cooperation and sacrifice in the name of freedom and democracy. The beaches of Normandy are now peaceful, but they are dotted with vast cemeteries, memorials, and museums that stand as solemn reminders of the events of June 6, 1944. The rows upon rows of white crosses and Stars of David at cemeteries like the Normandy American Cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer, overlooking Omaha Beach, are a profoundly moving testament to the thousands who gave their lives. Each year, veterans, families, world leaders, and grateful citizens gather there to pay their respects and ensure that the memory of their sacrifice is never forgotten. The legacy of D-Day continues to resonate deeply in our modern world, serving as a powerful lesson about the cost of war and the importance of defending liberty against tyranny. It reminds us that freedom is not guaranteed and must sometimes be fought for by ordinary people willing to do extraordinary things. The courage and determination of the soldiers who stormed the beaches of Normandy ensured that Europe could be rebuilt from the ashes of war, founded on principles of peace and cooperation. Their story is not just a chapter in history books. It is a living legacy that continues to inspire future generations to stand up for what is right, no matter the odds.